Hello and welcome to the 14th episode of SOL's 2023 webinar series featuring presentations on ecological land care. My name is Christine and I'm the Special Projects Lead with SOL. I'm happy to be your host today. I live in Ottawa on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe. Before we begin, I'd like to mention that this webinar series and much of SOL's work is made possible by the generous support of Gaia College, Canada's leading college for professional development and diploma courses in ecological land care. At the end of this presentation, we will have approximately 15 minutes for discussion. So you have questions, please put them in the chat. And just a reminder that we are recording this episode and it will be available on SOL's website and YouTube channel in a few days. Finally, for today's presentation, I'm pleased to introduce Mehdi Sharifi from the Summerland Research and Development Center, who will present on the Indigenous Food Plant Demonstration Garden. Thank you for being here today, Mehdi, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Christine, for the introduction. And I would like, before I start, to thank the SOL for giving me this opportunity and coordinating the presentation. Thank you very much. As you mentioned, I'm going to present on the Indigenous Food Plant Demonstration Garden. My name is Mehdi Sharifi. I'm a research scientist at Summerland Research and Development Center, which is one of the research facilities of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada in BC. I would like to acknowledge my co-authors or the colleagues who helped me in establishing the garden, Dana Johnson and Kyle Clark. They were my co-op students that supported the establishment of the garden, and also Bill Rabi, my research technician. We received support from many different groups, and particularly students and field services at Summerland Research Station. The funding we received from the Idea Farm Initiative, and we got quite a bit of support from the Idea Farm Initiative team of Agriculture Agri-Food Canada. Many of my students, they help and they volunteer to work at the garden. Field services of the Summerland Station, they help quite a bit. Friends of Ornamental Garden, we got a lot of support from them and from the Sagebrush native plant nurseries. So I appreciate all the support. Okay. I would like to here acknowledge the land that we're living and working. We respectfully acknowledge that we operate on the unceded and ancestral territory of the Syilx people. The territory of the Syilx Okanagan Nation covers an area of over 69,000 square kilometers north to Mika Creek and south across the 49 parallel to Nicola Valley in British Columbia. We are responsible to walk with respect on the land and to honor the sovereignty of the Syilx Nation. The map on the left, it shows the territory of the Syilx Okanagan Nation, which is a big part in British Columbia, and it goes all the way to Alberta, and south part of that is in the Washington state. The left picture you see is the station that I work at. It's called Summerland Research and Development Center. And those trees that you see to the left towards the end, that's the place that we established this Indigenous demonstration garden. So back in 2019, there was a call at Agriculture Agri-Food Canada under the Idea Farm Initiative. They asked for the ideas that help for improving the workplace for the employees. I come up with this idea of having an Indigenous garden at the station for multiple objectives, which I'm gonna mention the objectives here. I put together a proposal and I submitted to the Idea Farm office, and after a while they came back and they liked the idea, and I received some funding, which kind of delayed the work delayed because of COVID during that time. And in 2021, we started the project. And this year is the third year of the project. The garden is already established. The first objective was to enhance the communication and collaboration between Summerland Research Station and Silk Okanagan Nation communities. We are on the ancestral land of Silk Okanagan Nation, as well as we have many neighboring communities in the region. There's 7 indigenous communities in the Silk Okanagan Nation, and we are very interested in expanding and communicating and collaborating with these communities. We wanted to enhance the cultural awareness and recognition in agriculture and agri-food Canada, especially for our employees. We wanted them to recognize the kind of the cultural aspects of the Indigenous food. Promote recognition and preservation of the culturally significant plant species. We have many native plant species that some of them they use as food and medicine by the Indigenous communities, and we wanted to recognize and preserve these very culturally important or significant plants. And lastly, we wanted to promote learning and furthering understanding of Indigenous food plants in terms of their ecology and use. We hire students to work at the garden and receive training. We wanted to enhance the culture, knowledge, and awareness opportunities with the signage and the demonstration that we had in this garden. And we wanted to have an area for the people to interact with the green space and learn about the Indigenous culture and help in the well-being of the staff and also the visitors. Here you see the timeline that we had for the projects. We started in April 2021. We prepared the land earlier in the spring 2021, April, May. We started having these raised beds. We added the amendment. We wanted to follow the Indigenous food principles, which is kind of use of the natural products and not using the agrochemicals. So we started adding those material before planting. We started testing the ground, and we started dividing the area of the garden to different zones based on the soil test and also based on the shade and other aspects of the land. And by the end of 2021, we almost planted most of the species that we wanted in the garden. And we started communicating with some of the artists, Indigenous artists, for some artwork, Indigenous artwork, to install at the garden. In 2022, we installed some shade nets for some of the plants that they require further more shade. And we continued the work, and we planted more species in 2022. And by this year, which is 2023, at the end of the season, I'll show you the pictures. The garden is fully established, and we have many plant species at the garden. This is the location of the garden. So we had 3 ponderosa pines in an area of our land or the station land. And this is the picture before we start our work. So there was basically nothing in that area. We considered this area because the trees provided some natural shade that was necessary for some of the species that we were interested. The two students at that year, I hired two co-op students, Dana Johnson and Kyle Clark. They were both Indigenous students at University of Victoria back then. Kyle is married, born and raised on the island on the Saanich territory. Dana, who is the Gitxsan ancestry, was born and raised in the Okanagan Valley on Silk territory. And both were very passionate about the botany, ethnobotany, permaculture, and indigenous land management. So I got very lucky, very enthusiastic students. Together as a co-op students, they began designing and establishing the garden with my supervision at the Summerland in April 2021. So we started the designing process. We had the location. We start collecting some samples. We start coming up with some designs based on the indigenous culture. And they were different design kind of processes, and we improved the design over the time. We installed irrigation system. We added some material that needed. We prioritized the material that were already available, low waste, compostable, lightweight, and locally sourced for establishing the garden. This is kind of the process of having different zones. So we come up with this little map that it shows 4 or 5 different zones based on the soil pH. So from the very lower soil pH to the higher soil pH, we have zone 1, 2, 3, and 4. So based on these 4 zones, we planted huckleberries in the zone 1. Huckleberries needed, or black huckleberry is native to this region, interior BC, and it's usually grow in the higher elevation with about 40-50% shade in the forest. We have soapberry and Saskatoon berries that they like more sun, so that was the second zone. We have a xeriscape area, which is native plants that grow in the Okanagan Valley. We planted in that area, and we had also indigenous roses or wild roses and chokecherries. The way that we chose the plant species, it was based on the observations, based on the readings of the literature, consulting with the experts, and also when we find a chance, we consulted with the elders from the communities, some knowledge of restoration and harvesting. So we collected all that knowledge, and we come up with a list of the plants that we wanted to grow at the garden. So the first plant was the black huckleberry. It is from the Vaccinium family, and we propagated some of those at the station. We installed some shade nets to provide 40-60% shade. As the plant need more lower pH acidic soil, we added some elemental sulfur to the soil, and then we had this irrigation scheduling, these 4 zones of irrigation, and the irrigation at the huckleberry was more frequent. So huckleberries are a native berry that kind of similar to the blueberries or lingonberries. The taste is a little bit more sour. And it's very important in terms of the indigenous food, but also for the wildlife, bear and birds and other animals. The second zone, we had mostly soapberry and Saskatoon berries. Soapberry is Schipperia, and Saskatoonberry were selected based on that they grow together, and they're very common in this region. They're also very important in terms of the food. You probably heard that the soapberry or sopalali is used for something that called Indian ice cream. When they whip it and add some sugar to that, it's become a foamy material, and it's very high on the antioxidants, particularly on the vitamin C. We also had yarrow, and yarrow has the nitrogen fixing capacity that help the land and other species. We had the rose and chokecherry, and we planted those in the areas that they needed shade. So when they grow, they can provide some shade to the other species. We also planted in between the roses and chokecherries, we planted some yarrow, wild strawberry, ocean spray, and other native pollinators. There were also the species that they flowering and they're attracting the insects and pollinators. The last zone was the xeriscape. In the xeriscape area, we planted the species that are very common to the Okanagan natural landscape. Species such as rabbit brush, antelope brush, basin sage, scarlet gilia, as well as multiple native grasses. In the fall, we collected some seeds from the arrowhead balsam root and fireweed, and we scattered and in this area for the spring to germinate. In the next phase of the experiment, we connected with some indigenous artists. One of them was Les Lewis. He created these memory poles, and memory poles are more common in the interior BC, whereas in the coastal region of BC, you see the totem poles. On these memory poles, there are pictures of different things. It could be animals, it could be plants, and we ordered one for the garden that you see in the right side of this slide. And on that one, most of the species that we have in this garden, they carved on the wood. So very beautiful piece of art that we installed in the garden. We also decided to have signs for the plants. As I mentioned, we wanted to use it as a tools for education. So we had for the main plant species, we connected with Codilicoi and created with her help, we created these very beautiful signs that they have a picture of the plant as well as the name of the plant in the Silk language, and in English, in French, and the scientific name of the plant. And we installed this signage in the garden. We installed some shade nets for the huckleberries and bird bugs, as well as a bench for people that they can sit and enjoy the environment there. This is an initial map of the garden with the location of the plant and the species. You see the legend on the left of the picture, which is list of the plant from huckleberry all the way to yarrow. So we created this one in 2021. This is an extended list of the plant that we used in the garden initially, but every year we go and we add, if any plant didn't make it, we replace those, as well as we adding some new species when the space allow. This is a newer picture from this year that you see we added at least 4 or 5 different species to the garden, including the waxy currant, spring beauty, some new huckleberries, as well as avalanche lily and balsam root. We had many people showed interest in the garden, and they came and visit the garden, including in July this year, we hosted BC Minister of Agriculture and show her the garden, and she was very impressed and supportive of the projects. But many people from the communities and public, they contact the schools and they ask for the tour of the garden, and we try to facilitate that when we can. This project received attention from our department. We have 20 research stations across the country, as you see in the map, and other centers, they also show interest to do a similar kind of to establish a similar garden with which kind of match with their native, of course, their native plants, and they collaborate with the communities in their region. At least 3 of these gardens, including ours, they're active, but there are 3 or 4 other stations that the establishment of the garden is in progress. We received this certification of recognition from the Seoul as a greener space competition in 2023, or 2022 competition, which we're very pleased with that, and we appreciate the certificate and the effort that the Seoul put in reviewing our application and recognizing our garden. I'll show you some pictures from 2023. So just this year in August, just a couple of months ago. As you see, the garden is now well established. You compare these pictures with the pictures that before establishment of the garden, very, very different environment. One of the artwork that we have is at this arbor, on top of the arbor, which is it says welcome to this place in Silk language. We have a little library to the left that we provided some information about the garden and the map of the garden for the visitors. As you see, we have the bench on the right, and if you look at on the pine trees, you see that we have 3 birds boxes. This is the entrance with the artwork on top. This is to the left is the huckleberry. Huckleberry plants, they don't grow too tall, so they're still like the early stages. In the middle, we have again, and in the second row, we have the huckleberries with some other species, such as avalanche lilies. And on the third panel, we have mainly the soapberry and Saskatoon berry. You see the signs here. This is the, I think, sign for the Kinnikinnick. which you see it on the ground. And to the left of that, we have the yarrow with the white flowers. And just behind the yarrows, we have the wild rose. This is that memory pole. And to the right of that, we have a chokecherry tree. And to the right of that, we have the wild strawberries. Here in the xeriscape, we have different plant species, as I mentioned. We have this nodding onion in the middle, beautiful. It's medicinal, and it's also can use as a food. And to the right and to the left, towards the end, we see the rabbit brush, which is a native plant in this region. To the right, we see the woolly thyme, and we see the one-eyed Susan plant with the beautiful flowers. Here we see a basin sage on top with some rabbit brush, and in the bottom again a different view of the rabbit brush. And in this picture, you see the yarrows that are growing in the area to the right. So the garden created a habitat for the different species. We see that birds, they're using the bird boxes. We see that bear, it's coming to the garden and especially playing with the signs. So we have multiple occasions that the signs were removed by the bear, and then we have to go and install it. And definitely a lot of pollinators and birds, they enjoy in the garden. Spring beauty is a very important plant in the interior BC. It's also called mountain potatoes or Indian potatoes, Claytonia. And we planted some of that in the garden. And this is the flowers that you see we had in early spring 2023. Future goals, we keep maintaining and working in the garden to make it fully established, become productive, produce some fruits, as well as becoming very resilient, and becoming a welcoming place for everyone who is interested to enjoy and learn. We want to inspire more like-minded Indigenous food plant gardens and permaculture projects, not only at Agriculture Agri-Food Canada Research Station, but also other public institutions. And we would like to continue hiring Indigenous youth to steward and grow the garden space and to cultivate perennial native gardens around the Summerland Research Station. With that, I would like to thanks different support that we receive, especially the financial support from Agriculture Agri-Food Canada Idea Farm initiative, as well as the ornamental garden and the sagebrush nursery and the management at Summerland Research and Development Center, as well as the field crew that they supported the project very much. Thank you very much for listening to the presentation.
Okay, well, Mehdi, thank you very much. It was wonderful to see the before picture and after of the specific site. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it looked like the Ponderosa pines, and then it was mowed lawn underneath.
Yes, yeah, almost not even lawn. It's just some weeds and some grasses that they just mowed it. So it was kind of like a waste space that they didn't do anything with that.
Yeah, no, it's amazing because that represents such a lost opportunity when it is a site such as that versus what you've created, which is an opportunity to have the density and the diversity that you've put in there. So I have questions, but I would love to ask the people who have joined us if they have any questions, if they could put them in the chat and we can have a discussion that way. I can read them out. But let me just start because you were the initiator of this project, and then you brought in the youth that came on board and Indigenous youth who have knowledge and expertise. And I just would love to hear from you on a personal level, sort of what you have learned from this project and this initiative, from the plants that you've become more familiar with, perhaps, and from the people that you've worked with.
Um, yeah, thanks. Great question. I never thought of that, but it was a really beautiful experience for me. Initially, um, I'll tell you a very quick story that I was driving with one of my colleagues to work, and we received this email about these proposals for the workplace improvement and so on. And I was just telling him that, oh, you know what? I'm thinking about having a small garden, indigenous garden at the station. And he was telling me that he would like to have a music room at the center. And then I said, are you going to put a proposal? And I said, no, I'm so busy. Not this time, maybe next time. And I said, yeah. And he said, are you going to put, and I said, yeah, I don't think so. That's so much work. I'm so busy with other stuff. But the same day, when I finished my work, I have 5 minutes before I leave. And I said, yeah, you know what? Maybe I should put something in. So I quickly put together an application and I submitted. The application was relatively short, and I submitted in. And just like a couple of weeks after I submitted that, which I didn't have any hope to get the funding for that, I got a call from the assistant deputy minister that says, did you put a proposal for Indigenous garden? I said, yeah, I did. Great, go ahead, do it. I said, really? I said, yeah, go ahead. I really like it. So that was it. It was just a very interesting process, and it was very inspiring. I learned a lot in this process from my students, from other people that we interacted, from the native plant nurseries, from the indigenous groups that or elders that I communicated with them. So very, very inspiring. I really enjoyed doing that. It was a lot of work for us, a lot, but at the end, it was really, we were all very happy. The students were so enthusiastic. They achieved a very beautiful goal. They learned a lot in the process. I gave them this kind of independency to go and research and bring the material to me. And then we sit together and we come up with a plan and go through this process. And it was all very enjoyable. Everyone was very supportive. So it was a very nice experience for me.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it, even just with your enthusiasm in that question, like answering that question. Oh, there's a long message in the chat, and um, maybe you can, I'll try to reserve that and keep that for you. But just a question is, I'm wondering how you and your team source seeds, if they were from the local area, etc. There's a lot more to that question, but I can just bring up that. Where did the seeds come from for the project?
Yeah, so um, we collected some of the seeds ourselves. So we just went to the nature and my student collected some of the seeds. We purchased some of the seeds from the native plant nurseries, as well as we get some of the plant as the transplants. So we purchased the transplants from native plant nurseries. And for huckleberry and soapberries, I propagated those as part of my research program at the station. So multiple sources that we had, but yeah, we at the end of the season, like for the arrowhead balsam root, as well as fireweed and some other species, we went and we collected some seeds. We didn't need a lot of seeds, so we just collected a little bit of seeds and we put it at the Zero Escape during the fall.
And do you see the site, the garden, being a site where you can collect seed in the future and have that
Yes.
available for dispersal? And is it also meant to disperse from that site? Would you mind if some of these plants sort of moved around and moved into further growing the garden? Would that be?
No, not at all. Um, so this is one of our goals, that we have some fruits as well as some seeds produced at the garden that people can come and they can take it. And we even want to have some for the animals
Yes.
to eat and enjoy that. But yeah, definitely that's one of our goals.
Okay, another question for you, and thank you for the presentation, is mentioned in the comment. And then just a little bit more, if you could talk about that planning process, and also in that planning process, what you mentioned what all those objectives were. Were those decided upon in consultation with the community, and especially with the students and the broader community?
Yes. So that consultation process, I didn't get to the details, but it was a long consultation process. So we reached out to the communities, as well as we reached out to different experts and different groups to get their opinion. Sometimes we received feedback, sometimes we didn't receive feedback. So we kind of try to kind of leave with that. Some people, they didn't believe that this is going to happen, so they were not like positive about it. And so we just have to work with what we had. And from the operational kind of perspective, we needed to do multiple requests, different groups at our station, the land managers, the manager of the station, and many other groups. So we consulted with them. And with that, first we selected a piece of a different location that was that had access, public access. But then we, due to some concern that the management had, then we moved it to a different location. So it was a long process. We tried to consult with anyone who was interested. Particularly, we reached out to the communities. But sometimes we received response, sometimes we didn't receive any response from them. But definitely this is something that we, over time, we're just working, and it is a tool that connect us with the communities. So we're trying to encourage communities to bring the kids from the school and elders to come to the station and kind of have a tour of the garden and use that as an educational tool. So we encourage everyone who is interested to come and see the garden.
Well, and
And
what you're saying
even
is,
volunteer, people can volunteer to work at the garden.
yeah, no, that's great. And I think as the garden grows and as the plants can be harvested in a certain way that, as you say, a lot of those plants have significance for medicine or for food or for
Yes.
tools, or so there's so many uses of them that is also extremely important to disseminate to people who come visit.
Yes, absolutely.
So there's another question, and I think so. Someone from, I think it's Farm Credit, yeah, Farm Credit Canada, a senior lender on the Indigenous financing team. They have a community fund to help communities fund their own gardens like this. Would anyone on this presentation want the QR code? We have already given funds to many gardens like this in Saskatchewan. So
Oh,
it
well,
definitely, that's good information to know.
for
I
sure.
think now there is a QR code in the chat. I'm going to try to save this chat afterwards because there seems to be quite
Yes.
a lot of content already, but that is good to know. And this just makes me think about how important these gardens are. We need to have these gardens so that we have a better understanding of land and the diversity of species that have existed there in the past, that are threatened now, or can possibly be there again. And maybe I just have one question related to that. This garden seems to be a refuge and for habitat and for some of the plants that are culturally significant. But can you just give a bit of perspective in the Okanagan? Like how does that fit in? What is the landscape like? And in terms of the biodiversity in the wider part of the Okanagan versus this little micro garden that you have.
Um, so Okanagan is a kind of a narrow and very long valley with a microclimate that, because of the mountains, the way that the Rocky Mountains is set, this microclimate is very distinct from anywhere else in Canada. It is a semi-arid region, so it's more like dry environment. This is the opposite of what you see in the Fraser Valley or down coast in Vancouver. They get more than 1,000 millimeter precipitation per year. We get 300 or so. So it's pretty dry. So very diverse flora that we have in this region. Different species of the plants growing in this semi-arid region. The land is very expensive. So most of that is used for agriculture. So majority of the land in the alley, they're under either grape production, cherry production, or apple production. So three major crops in the region. What we hoping to encourage is that to even having the agriculture setting, consider having these islands of biodiversity. So having this kind of gardens in the areas that they're not planting, either maintaining the natural habitat in that area or allowing some of these native plants to grow and attract the other species like beneficial insects as well as the wildlife to use them. So yeah, it is a mixed kind of environment. On the higher elevations, it is more like natural, it's forest and more natural land. In the lower elevations, it's more agriculture.
Right. Okay. Another question that came in, do you anticipate any barriers or challenges for the long-term sustainability of the garden? Does it need funding, or do you see some of the threats too from anything?
So yeah, so the funding, it's always an issue. The funding that we received was an initial funding to establish the garden, but we didn't receive any funding for the maintenance of the garden. So we just, I do that as part of my research program. So my students and other students at the station, they volunteer to help with the garden, and they enjoy their time at lunchtime or any time that they're free. They can go to the garden and they sign up and then they go there. And one of my students or myself, we're there. So we direct them, we teach them how to do things, and they use, we can use that as a teaching or learning opportunity for the students. But yeah, definitely funding is always an issue. We would like to expand the garden, but funding is a limitation and a space.
Well, is this the first time that Indigenous students have been brought in as interns at the Somerset Research Center?
Not necessarily the first time, but the year. So I have also other plant-related, Indigenous plant-related research project other than the garden. So garden is a part of my a smaller kind of like project, but in the scope of agriculture, agri-food, working with the Indigenous communities and hiring Indigenous students to help with these projects. From 2018, we started getting more and more, and the funding approved for the Indigenous projects to work with the Indigenous communities. So from that time, 2018, we received more Indigenous students work at the station. This garden and my projects bring a lot of Indigenous students in a way that in 2000, I think 2021, we had the largest number of the Indigenous students across all the other stations in Canada. So we received quite a bit of attention from the Indigenous students due to the garden, but also other projects related to the that I do or my colleagues, they do with the different Indigenous communities in the region.
Okay. All right. There's a comment by Tatum about if you want to check out that funding source, it could
sure.
help with your expansion, or at least the
That would be,
sustainability of the garden. So that's a nice
that's
context.
very nice. Very nice. Thank you so much.
Well, we've reached the end of this time, but Mehdi, I want to thank you personally for what you have done and what you've led in this pilot project that is going to have significance not only for where you are, but also in terms of inspiring other similar gardens. And I have more questions. Let me just ask one, and that is, why do you think, and who named them sort of wellness gardens, and what does that mean for you in terms of the significance for health from these types of gardens?
Um, yeah, so we have a working group that we sit together every couple of months and we talk about the gardens and the plan for the having the gardens across the Canada stations. And we wanted to kind of have a broader term, and they choose this wellness garden uh, because in multiple levels it contribute to the wellness of the staff and the visitors. They enjoy the environment. They have a beautiful place to sit, and sometimes for the lunch they can go and sit in the garden. They can walk in the garden during their break time. The visitors can enjoy and spend as much as time as they want in the garden. So this contribute to the wellness of the people, and they just thought maybe this is a good name to choose. The wellness garden might be appropriate.
Okay, thanks for that explanation. And thank you for everybody else for joining us today on this call and for your
Thank
questions
you.
and comments and information about this potential funding. So with that, I'll wrap it up, and I'll just say that this was the final installation or episode of Soul's 2023 Ecological Land Care Series. All of the recordings are on our website and YouTube channel. And as well, we have ones from the last year. We have many more in our resource library on Soul's website. So thank you again for your work. And as a greener green space, this is an exceptional and exemplary example. And thank you for today's presentation.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Have a wonderful day.
Yeah,
Thanks.
you too. Okay, thank you.